Food and your emotions is the topic of this morning's chapel event. Annie Fox, a well-known nutritionist, counselor in the New York City area, is more than qualified to discuss this topic. By her own admission, she is self-taught in the area of nutritional counseling. No school or university offers this kind of course of study which matched her interests. In her private practice, she sees many clients with a variety of illnesses, from weight problems to digestive disorders to cancer. I do not need to tell you how important this subject of nutrition is and how easily we ignore good advice. I am one who does it quite constantly. Born in New York City, she is a product of the Fieldston School and went on to major in art at NYU. While she was continuing her studies at the Parsons School of Design, an event took place which changed dramatically the direction of her life. I'll let her tell you about that. Annie Fox.
Good morning, and I am Annie Fox. I'm 36 years old, and everybody always wants me to tell the interesting story of how I got involved in the world of health and nutrition and healing. It's something that did happen when I was 20 years old. I was in a head-on collision in a taxi cab, and I was very seriously injured in the collision, but part of the experience of that crash was a death experience that I really left my body and began the process of dying, and I was very aware of what was happening to me. I wasn't scared at all. It wasn't anything that was scary in any way. But I was also aware that I really did not want to die under any circumstances. I wasn't ready to die. I wasn't ready to end my life. I didn't feel as though I had accomplished anything. I was just a 20-year-old girl. I had had a good life up until that point. I had been very creative, and I'd had great relationships with people, and I enjoyed art, and I enjoyed life, and I enjoyed food, and I enjoyed a lot of things, but I'd never really done anything, and that was the first thing that hit me when I realized that this was the moment of my death. And I started pleading with God knows who for my life back, and I started making deals. I said, I'll be good, I promise, I'll do anything I have to do, but please don't make me be dead now. And a few minutes later, I was coming back to consciousness. I was being pulled from the wreckage of the cab. The poor cab driver's face, he had seen me lying in the back of the cab and had seen that I appeared to be dead. And he was already blaming himself and feeling horrible, and all of a sudden he saw my eyes flickering open, and it was almost as though that was the beginning of his life too. But from that point on, everything changed for me. All of a sudden, a lot of my decisions changed. I found that I wasn't able to eat meat anymore, and it was an overnight change. I had really eaten a lot of meat up until that point. In fact, my family was used to serving steaks and chops and such foods at the dinner table every night, but all of a sudden, even the thought of meat was abhorrent to me. I didn't want to know about any slaughter of any animal. I didn't want to have blood in my mouth. I didn't want to even think about that kind of thing. And I realized that if I was going to stop eating meat, that I better really be aware of what I was eating to make sure that I got everything that I needed from my foods. Because I didn't want to be a weak vegetarian. I didn't want to sacrifice my health for my principles. So I started studying, and I had many years to be able to study on my own because I was really recuperating from the accident for several years after that. And I got a chance to read a lot, and I got a chance to research things in medical libraries, and I realized how much information is available out there if you really just go and look for it. And I gave myself time to gain information about what my possibilities were. I also started feeling the difference when I would eat certain foods in my body. Certain foods would give me power, certain foods would give me balance, other foods would throw me off completely. Now this was a process that happened, as I said, over a period of many years. Even the situation of not eating the meat, it took me a long time I realized that I also couldn't eat chicken, that I also couldn't eat fish. It was a gradual process that happened over a period of maybe, I would say 6 or 7 years, where I really began to refine my diet. But one of the things that came up really strongly to me was the issue of food and its effect on your emotions. Because as you can imagine, having an experience as I had in that accident was a very traumatic experience. It was a very wrenching experience. It made me feel as though I was, at times, halfway away from the world and halfway in the world. And I wanted as much as possible to maintain my balance in the world. I wanted to be as grounded as possible. I wanted to feel my aliveness. And I found that when I would eat a food like sugar, or when I would eat anything that was chemicalized, that I would feel my energy dissipate. In a way, my energy would get very quick and very sharp for a short period of time, but then it would almost feel as though it dissipated into the air around me, and I would get very, very sleepy, and I would get very lethargic, and it reminded me of the way I had been for most of my life in school as a kid. I would wind up showing up for school and a lot of times falling asleep in class, or feeling as though my attention was wandering, or wondering why everybody could stay awake and I couldn't, or thinking that maybe there was something wrong with me, that maybe I wasn't quite as smart as everybody else. And I realized that a lot of that had to do with what I was eating. I realized that when I ate dairy products, I felt very dull, and my voice would actually change. My voice would sound clogged. My breathing would be clogged. I would just feel very numbed by eating the dairy products, so I eliminated the dairy products. And as I said, the sugar seemed to dissipate my energy, so I eliminated the sugars. And it just kept on going until I evolved the kind of diet that I really eat today, which is based on seasonal whole foods, which is based on eating whatever I want, but my desires have changed dramatically because I'm so attached to physical power now, and I'm so attached to mental sharpness and accuracy that I don't really crave anything that would take me away from that state. This is something that can only be done by the individual. Everybody is completely individual in the way food affects them. There are no two people that can eat the same in this world. And that's why the best person to take care of the decisions over what should or should not be in your diet is you yourself. And the best time to really start working on it is really now. Because you have many years before you really have to come up with a diet that's going to last you for a lifetime. You have many years of discovery and experimentation. Your bodies are still growing. You're still experiencing major changes physiologically. It's a great time now to start feeling what you're eating that holds you back, what you're eating that pins you down, and what you're eating that elevates you and that increases the amount of power and clarity that you have. Chemicals are another issue now in our food chain. And worse than that, the subject of irradiation of food, which is a widespread possibility. A lot of foods have been irradiated for years, including herbs and spices. Wheat, potatoes have been irradiated for years, and that's been going on with the public completely unaware of it happening. But right now there are bills put up to irradiate many, many foods in this country, including fresh fruits and vegetables, and also to have it so that there is no marking to show what foods have been irradiated. Now there are major supermarket chains that have decided that they would not allow irradiated produce to be sold in the supermarket because they know the consumer reaction is going to be negative. But there are many, many other stores that will be selling irradiated produce if it's allowed to pass through. And you would be unaware of whether your food has been exposed to radiation or not. Now, I'm sure most of you have been aware of the possible negative effects of radiation, not only from the Chernobyl accident, but also from any kind of nuclear or atomic problem that's been talked about in the past. But when it's directly affecting your food chain, it's a little bit closer to home. It's something that you would be eating on a daily basis that would be exposed to this same negative energy. And it's a good time to really be learning about this stuff because you do have a say in it. Everybody has a say in this. Everybody can decide. I have never really been a political being. I've never really connected with politics on a sociological level. But when it comes to the food chain, when it comes to what I'm putting in my body, I am extremely politically aware. And I'm aware of the power that each of us has. But the initial power that each of us has is with our own bodies. In other words, hypocrisy does not work. If you're preaching one thing and doing another thing, it's going to be seen as being what it is, and you're going to be losing power from that. So the most important thing is to start with your own body. Your own body is your own world. And you have to decide what you want in your world and what you don't want in your world. Do you want chemicals in your world? Well, if you allow them in your body, then they will be allowed in your world, your personal world. Do you eat because of reacting to something and then craving a food in reaction to something? Or do you eat actively? Do you actively select what you're going to have? A good case in point with this is a lot of times I work with people who eat to numb certain emotions that they're feeling. This is most obvious in the use of drugs, obviously, or alcohol, where people use drugs or alcohol to help them forget what they're feeling that's so painful to them. But people use food in exactly the same way. There are even children in my daughter's class, she's only 5 years old, but there are children in her class that are being given food as a drug by their parents. If they cry, they're given a lollipop to quiet them down, to shut them up. If they're upset about something, they're given a candy bar. This is, I would consider, the use of food as a drug. In other words, it's not the active use of food as a nutrient. It's the reactive use of food as a drug, to numb, to quiet down, to make you forget, to block your emotions, to stop you from feeling something. If you block your emotions like that, if you stop your feelings, you can never do something to alleviate the cause that's producing those feelings. Now, I was experiencing this as a child myself. My father died when I was 13 years old, and it was a big blow to me. It was a very sudden death. And emotionally, I was completely thrown. And I remember the kind of eating I did at that period of time. I ate food specifically to really pass out, literally, of my emotional state. I ate enormous amounts of sugar. I ate enormous amounts of candy. I ate lots of ice cream. I ate things that would make me forget how I was feeling. And for as long a period of time as I was doing that, I kept these feelings under wraps. And they became stronger and stronger and stronger. And until I got to the point where I realized what I was doing and stopped eating these foods and using these foods as drugs to numb my feelings, those feelings were never able to surface and be dealt with and be released in a way that I was no longer carrying them with me every day. So it's important to take a look at what we eat because we actually want to eat it, because it gives us some energy and some power and some grounding, and what we eat because we don't want to feel the way we're feeling. It's always better to feel the way you're feeling and do something about it. No matter what the situation is in your life, there's always a way to change it so you can be comfortable with it. The issue of seasonal foods is an important issue too, because we're living in an area that has very strong seasons. We have a summer that's a strong, hot summer. We have a winter that's an intense, cold winter, which we've just lived through. Our springs are beautiful, our falls are beautiful. We don't live in Southern California where the temperature is pretty much the same year-round. We don't live in Florida. We live in a place where there's dramatic temperature change. All of this impacts on the food that's grown in this area. And the way that nature works, which is wonderful, is that nature provides us with foods that warm us in the winter, and the foods that grow or can be stored during the winter, and foods that cool us in the summer, in the foods that grow and can be utilized in the summertime. So the summer vegetables can cool our bodies, and the winter vegetables can warm our bodies. And if you think about the density of winter vegetables, winter squashes, root vegetables, hard vegetables, you realize they pretty much have to be cooked. They're pretty dense, and they're very low in water. So they make your body more like that. They make your body a little bit more dense, a little bit more impervious to the cold. Whereas the summer vegetables that are lighter, that are more open, that are quicker growing, that are more full of water, more plentiful, more green, those vegetables are there to cool our bodies. The summer fruits, the juicy summer fruits, are there to cool our bodies. But we've become so separated from nature in the way that we understand what foods are possible for us that we don't remember that strawberries don't grow in New York in January. Because everything's available in the supermarket. Everything is available all year round. There's no discrimination. There's no definition. People forget what the seasons are. if there's any way for any of you to start going to the green markets some weekends when they open up again in the beginning of the spring, really. The green markets get going, but they don't really start strongly until closer to June, when the farmers really have a lot of produce. If any of you can get into Manhattan and go to the green market at the top of Union Square, at 17th Street and Union Square one Saturday morning, you can really see what the produce is that grows locally. You can really see how beautiful the stuff is, how different it is from in the supermarket, how vital it is, how powerful it looks, and how incredible it tastes, and how cheap it is. And you can see the farmers that grow the foods. This is the way things used to be. People used to buy their foods from farmers. They didn't buy them from supermarkets. People used to only buy food in season, or grow it themselves, or trade with their neighbors to get these foods. But since we're so separated from this cycle in nature, we don't even remember what season we're in. And I speak to a lot of people, and I find that the only people that remember seasonality are the elderly people that I work with, are the people that used to live in situations where they would buy from farmers. And a lot of these people are the healthiest people, because they remember that, and they remember now that that's the way to buy their food. So even when they go to the supermarket, they only buy seasonal foods. Some of these people are even up in their 90s, and they're still eating well because they remember that very simple fact of seasonality. So really what we're working with is we're working with the concept of seasonality. We're working with the concept of minimal, if any, chemicals in the food chain or chemical processes involving foods. That means we're also working with foods in as whole a state as possible, which brings up the concept of fortified foods or enriched foods or nutrient-replenished foods, like a lot of breakfast cereals, so you can get all your vitamins from this cereal every morning. The only reason why you can get all your vitamins from those cereals is because they put vitamins in those cereals, ground up. You might as well be taking vitamins, but if you want to be getting your foods to be your source of nutrients, those are the worst things to pick because they're totally nutrient deficient. So you're actually paying for a box full of powdered vitamins in food. If most people realized that that's what they were buying, they probably wouldn't buy these cereals. All of these cereals are also laced with enormous amounts of sugar and enormous amounts of salt. So it's great to read labels. It's great to see what's really in your food. And labels are always sequential, so the first ingredient is always the ingredient that's the most in the food. And as you progress down the label, the ingredients that are last are the ones that are in the least concentration. So it's good to start reading the labels. It's good to minimize salt. It's good to minimize chemicals. It's great to minimize or eliminate sugar as much as possible. Artificial sweeteners are rampant now. NutraSweet, aspartame. The artificially sweetened soft drinks are widely used in this country. And it's a big myth of artificial sweeteners. It's one of the biggest myths there is. People believe that if they eat artificially sweetened foods that they'll lose weight because the caloric count of these foods is very low. The secret about artificial sweeteners is that they cause you to gain weight. In fact, they cause you to gain weight even more than sugar. And if they didn't cause you to gain weight, the industry wouldn't be as large as it is. In other words, if you could drink artificially sweetened sodas and lose weight, everybody would become thin and nobody'd have to buy them anymore. But since when you drink them, you get fatter, you feel that you need to drink them more, so you drink them more and you get fatter, and then you feel you need to drink them more, and it's actually quite an addictive cycle. These people aren't stupid. They understand what they're doing. They want to make money. It's more to their advantage for you to stay fat and guilty and keep buying their product than for you to get them and be independent of having to use their product. So it's an important thing to understand. You have to see through the advertising on a lot of levels. You have to understand that people are in food as a business. The only people that it's really important to listen to nowadays are really the farmers, because the farmers are being given a bum rap. The farmers are being considered as a low end in the food chain because they're producing things supposedly that people don't want, and they're asking for too high prices, and the technology of farming has gotten out of hand. The farmer is the one that loses. The farmer is the one that makes the least amount of money from his crops. The middlemen, and there are several levels of middlemen before the food gets to you, are the ones that make the most. So as much as possible, it pays to make the contact with these farmers. It pays to learn who these people are that are growing your food. That's another invaluable lesson from the green market structure, is that you get to meet these people. They are wonderful, wonderful people by and large. There are certain farmers that I've been buying vegetables from for over 8 years now, and I've been invited onto their farms, and my daughter's been able to pick her own raspberries and learn what Chinese cabbage looks like when it's growing out of the ground, and it's an incredible experience to do this. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to reconnect with your food, to reconnect with it as a source of power, and to understand it better. I think it's an important thing to learn as much as you can, and a lot of times the best way to learn is by asking. So I'd like to open up the floor now for questions. And anybody that has any questions concerning food, concerning health, concerning diet, concerning healing, please step up and ask what you like.
How do you propose that a society that's been practically dependent on sugar for centuries and other products such as meat just stop? I mean, practically all of us here eat sugar in everyday foods, and how can we avoid it?
Well, the best way to start is obviously through education. The best way to start is by learning where the sugar comes from, how it's processed, what the political situation is in the production of the sugar. Because a great degree of the sugar that is used in a lot of the products that you're talking about is produced from the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic is an area in the world that is actually owned by a major corporation. Gulf and Western owns the Dominican Republic. So if you're realizing that one major U.S. company, Gulf and Western, is producing the majority of the sugar that's being used in the foods that you're eating, you're really understanding more of a big brother situation than you are aware of. It pays politically for people to keep eating sugar because it feeds an enormous company's profits. So if you realize, okay, it's a charged issue, but also there are many other sources of sweetness that are actually better for your body than sugar. And if you progressively start exploring those other sources, you'll find that your body actually feels better with those sources, that it feels better with less of them, that it needs more sugar to get the feeling of sweetness, and it actually needs less of these more concentrated, more natural sweeteners like barley malt, like rice syrup, like maple syrup, to get that feeling of satisfaction. Then your well-being will be the thing that keeps you into leaving the sugar behind.
This is just a question statement.
Sure.
Isn't it also true that sugar that we obtain naturally by honey and other types of syrup have much more calories than...
No, because it depends how your body utilizes the calories. Sugar, as white sugar, has absolutely no fiber in it and absolutely no minerals. The fiber and the minerals are the keys that tell your body how to utilize that sweetener. Whereas the other sweeteners that you're talking about have a certain degree of fiber and a certain degree of minerals in them, and that dictates to your body how to utilize them, how to metabolize them. So if you don't get full metabolism of the sugar, it's going to be stored in your body as fat. Any sugar that is left over, that is not used by the body, is stored as fat. It's stored as a very sticky fat in the body. So to eliminate that possibility, to use the more natural sweeteners and with moderation, you're just as satisfied, but your body is taking in something that it knows how to utilize. It's taking in a whole food.
Thank you.
Sure.
Vegetables. We eat a lot of vegetables in my house. I find that most of them are covered with wax. Are all vegetables now being covered with wax, or is it most of them? And does running warm water over it take off the wax, or is that just
No, there are actually some natural preparations that can help remove the wax, but the unfortunate thing about the waxing is that it's done for preservation. It's done to preserve vegetables for long periods of time. And really, they start decaying from the inside out that way, so you're getting a vegetable that doesn't have the same kind of life or integrity as it does. But if you encounter waxed vegetables, the only way to really be scrupulous about removing the wax is to peel them. And the sad thing about them is that if you peel them, you're going to be losing a lot of the nutrients. So it's really, it's an unfortunate thing. That's another thing that's great about the farmers markets, is that all the vegetables there are in their natural state and freshly picked.
This is just what you said. You talk about how wonderful the farmers are, and I agree, but isn't it the farmers who cover most of our vegetables that we get in the supermarket with the chemicals?
Well, a lot of that is done by farming conglomerates. In other words, the farmers that participate in the green market program, there are a lot of organic farmers there now. There are at least
8 at the Union Square Green Market, and it's growing every year. By connecting with these farmers, you realize how much pressure is put on the farmers to use these chemicals by the growing conglomerates, the growing organizations. But there is the North American Organic Farmers Association in this area that is feeding information to the organic farmers and helping them cope with being able to survive as farmers without the use of pesticides. A lot of times it's not up to the farmers, it's pressured by the growing associations and pressured by the food sellers, excuse me. And you really have a say in that. You can decide to buy organic produce, you can decide to buy things that are grown by people that are more scrupulous with their growing methods. The food is infinitely more delicious and definitely more nutritious for you.
Are you a macrobiotic?
No, I'm a human being.
No, I mean, the thing I'm wondering about is the principles that you seem to believe in are shared with people
Who are involved in macrobiotics. Okay, I read a lot about macrobiotics as part of my education in food. And the quarrels that I have with macrobiotics is that it is basically a Japanese dietary form, and I am not Japanese, nor am I living in Japan. It is not reflective of my culture. It is not reflective of my background or my eating style in childhood. So what I've done is I've established many of the concepts of macrobiotics in my own dietary form, but my dietary form is based on this area where I'm living. It's based on my heritage. It's based on my food likes and dislikes, but it's also incorporating the concept of balance that's inherent in macrobiotics. So I am not anything. I just eat the way
The
I've
thing I was
decided.
wondering about is that it seems like a lot of macrobiotic people have iron poor blood.
Yeah, I would agree.
Why does that happen?
Why does that
That was
happen?
my real question. Why do macrobiotics have iron poor blood?
Okay, because a lot of times when people go on a strict dietary regime, they do it for philosophical reasons or they do it for reasons of penance. They feel so bad about how they ate or how they treated their bodies up to that point that they do it in a sort of religious sense. And there was a lot of pressure in the macrobiotic community many years ago for people to go on diets that were excluding major food groups. People subsisted literally on rice and vegetables, and that's not enough to give you what you need. You need a much wider diet than that. So I think the people that you would find with these iron deficiencies were more likely people that stuck to a too rigid diet or a too extreme diet or did it for the wrong reasons rather than doing it with enlightenment.
What do you recommend as a daily diet for people our age? It seems like most people, I guess, are eating the wrong things from what you're saying.
Well, the things that are usually missing from most people's diets are enough fresh vegetables. In other words, not frozen, not canned, but actually lightly cooked fresh vegetables, either steamed or lightly sautéed or poached or baked or in soups. But the other major food group that's missing from most people's diets is the food group of the whole grains, which includes brown rice, obviously, but also oats and barley and millet and rye and wheat. There are many, many whole grains. Most people encounter them only as flours, like whole wheat bread or something like that. But to actually eat them in their whole state, to eat cooked brown rice more often, to eat millet, to eat buckwheat. These are foods that are extremely nutritious and very delicious, and they're, for the most part, missing from most people's diets. To eat more natural sweetened foods rather than chemically or artificially sweetened foods. To eat more oils, to avoid deep fried foods, to decide for yourself whether you want to go more towards a vegetarian diet, or if you're not, to really take a look at what's in the meat and the poultry and the fish that you're eating, and try to minimize that as much as possible if you're going to still keep it in. But to be more on the side of the whole grains, the vegetables, the fruits, to really explore the whole foods in general, that's what I would recommend.
The meats that we buy down in supermarkets are filled with nitrates. I mean, if you're going to eat meat,
Well, if you're going to eat meat, that's also a very politically charged issue now, but at Grand Union you can get organically raised beef. And there's a vast difference between that beef and the chemically raised beef that is normally in the supermarket. If you're going to eat it, eat the best quality possible. You don't want to be eating hormones. You don't want to be eating growth stimulants, and that's what you find in regular meats. The same thing with chicken. You don't want to be eating hormones and arsenic and sulfides and all the rest of that that's in the chickens. So you're better off buying a chicken that's been raised naturally and eggs that have been raised naturally too. Sure.
You said that artificial sweeteners you gain weight. Does that mean like diet soda?
Yeah.
That's what you meant. Yeah. I mean, it seems a little illogical to me because I mean, she got say I don't know how many calories in a Coke, but it's a lot more than a say a Diet Coke or something like that. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, it would seem logical that the more calories you have, the more weight you gain, or the less calories you have, the less weight you gain.
Calories aren't the only thing that determine weight gain or weight loss. It's also the way that the body utilizes the food. And if the body reads the artificial sweetener as sugar, the body will utilize it as sugar. Also, you get used to such a high level of sweetness in your diet by using the artificial sweeteners that you have to use more and more of them at higher levels to satisfy that sweet urge. So you're actually increasing your sweet tooth instead of decreasing it. And when you're eating other foods that aren't artificially sweetened, you'll find that you crave larger amounts of those sugar-sweetened foods because your sweet tooth is like the tooth of a walrus by that time, and you really need to satisfy it with volume. So, yeah.
You said that you should stick to fruits and vegetables during the season.
Yeah.
Well, if farm markets usually don't come out until spring, what can you do about obtaining winter vegetables in season?
Okay, well, if you're looking specifically for organically grown vegetables, there are many health food stores like Perelandra in this area, Back to the Land in Park Slope, many health food stores in the city. But if you're looking at a regular supermarket or a Korean vegetable store or something like that, what you have to be looking for is the vegetables that are winter vegetables in this area are basically the vegetables that could last through the winter in a root cellar, which would be the hard vegetables like winter squashes, like pumpkins, which would be root vegetables like carrots and parsnips and turnips and onions. Hard vegetables, dense vegetables are basically winter vegetables. Kale can grow under the snow. Collard greens can grow under the snow. So those are vegetables, green vegetables that you can have throughout the winter. Also, you can make sprouts during the winter. You can eat sprouts during the winter and grow them yourself, and that's another way of getting greens into your diet. So there are many things that you have to be aware of as far as the density of the vegetables to be able to buy winter vegetables successfully. Sure.
I've been reading a lot of different books on health and what you should put into your body, and you come across conflicting information. And I was just wondering kind of what to believe and when to believe it, or is it based on experiment?
I'm saying it's a total experiment, which is why there's no school that can teach you, which is why there's no one book. Even though I'm attempting to write a book right now, I'm even saying in that book that really what I'm writing about are my own experiences and how to help people have their own experiences with food and be able to judge for themselves what's appropriate for them. But your body is your laboratory. It's the only way you'll ever know what does what to you. You may have food allergies that nobody else around you has. You may have food sensitivities. You may actually need more of certain foods than other people in your family may need. You may need to eat at different times of the day. These are things that only you can find out by how well you feel by doing it. And you have to be able to judge the difference between eating reactively and eating actively. So if you use that as your criteria, then you'll be able to evolve your own dietary patterns, and it'll be involved with strength, and it'll be involved with power. It won't be involved with hearsay or love.
What do you think of the theory that lead poisoning caused the American Revolution?
Never heard of it.
Well, since you're talking about food and power, well, apparently George III, his favorite foods were lemonade and sauerkraut. And these were prepared in pots, these were bread. And the lead poisoning caused them to go bad.
Well, I would believe it. I would believe it. I've seen kids eat lead paint off of their clips and go nuts from that. So I would definitely believe it, but I don't know if that would be the only cause of something that's widespread as a conflict. But I would say that lead poisoning is also a problem to deal with nowadays in society, especially with the brownstone renovations that are going on now. There are a lot of people in areas where there's a lot of brownstone restoration going on, where paint is being stripped and all wall coverings are being stripped, that are suffering right now from lead poisoning, and they're totally unaware that that's what they're being exposed to. So it's still an issue, it's still a problem, so is aluminum. In fact, the link between aluminum and Alzheimer's disease is enormous now. So I would say no aluminum
lunch last year, I only get $3 a day for lunch. And, and I eat a lot of food. And every time I went to Paralanda, the health store on Montague, or any other health store, the only thing I could afford was peanuts. Seriously, we're nuts. I couldn't afford the sandwiches there. I couldn't, the tofu or whatever it is. I couldn't afford everything there was so expensive. And in every health store I've gone to, it's so expensive that I can't even afford it, even if I, desired it, which I don't most often. But I can't afford it when I want it.
Yeah, well, that is a problem because health food stores at this point in history are out to make as much money as they can too. And a lot of them aren't geared towards really helping people as much as they're geared towards turning a profit. I've always had a fantasy, and I hope it becomes a reality, that there will be fast food chains that will supply people with nutritious meals. But really, the health food stores are there to serve people that are doing a lot of their own cooking, which is why they sell so much basic ingredients for people. And if I only had $3 a day for lunch, I would probably tend to make all my own foods. I would buy bread, I would buy different things to make sandwich fillings. I would buy vegetables and use vegetables to make soups, and I would bring soups in thermoses. I would really make the kind of lunches that I'm making for my daughter now to bring to school, and those come in way under $3 a day. But I do have to do the work. So if you decide that you want that quality in your food, unfortunately in this day and age, you may have to do the work yourself.
It's much easier just to go to McDonald's.
Yeah, well, it comes out. If you eat a McDonald's meal, you come out a McDonald's person. So, sorry to say it.
I've always heard a lot of things about chicken and red meat being like really hard for me. I don't eat it, but I eat fish. And what's like in terms of the chemicals, what's bad?
Okay, there's a way to select good fish. It's unfortunate because fish is a wonderful food, but the problem now is the water, not the fish. You don't want to eat the fish that swim at the top of the water because those fish are going to be the fish that are highest in fat, so they're the most buoyant, so they can go to the top. But they're also the fish that are going to be swimming through all the oil spills and all the garbage that's at the top. So you don't want them.
Well, how do you know?
Well, I'll tell you which ones are good. You don't want the guys at the bottom like flounder and salmon and all the guys that crawl and the bivalves and crustaceans. You don't want them because the PCBs, the polychlorinated biphenyls, that are extremely powerful and known carcinogens, are all heavier than water and they drop to the bottom. So the fish that are the best are the fish that swim quickly through the middle of the water, where it's the coldest, where it's the fastest current, and where there's the least possibility of there being any pollutants. Those fish are scrod, codfish, whiting, ocean perch, red snapper, haddock, sardines, and smelts. Those are the best fish to eat nowadays. Freshwater fish is not great. Swordfish is no good because it's a top fish. It's a fatty fish. Tuna is one of the worst fish to eat. And a lot of times it's not tuna anyway, it's dolphin. And if any of you have ever met a dolphin, you know that you never want to eat it. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
I would have some resolve to make some changes, and I hope to it. It would be nice to think that you would come back and do this again to keep us